Well, this morning I'm at Colourful Radio, where I've just been interviewed by the wonderful Gus Chipungu, the presenter of the morning show. And Gus, tell me a bit about Colourful Radio.
Yeah, so Colourful Radio was founded by Kofi, the gentleman you met when you were arriving. We've had Lorna Morrison as our managing director for the past few years. She's been responsible for developing the political programming and she's been very successful at it too. She brought me in, trained me up. I've been here since January as a formal presenter. Before that, I'd been a guest on the this radio station, as well as a few other outlets. We've peaked in terms of listenership, about 1.2 million listeners around the world. I'll be interested to see how many listeners we had this morning, but I suspect, having had Syed Kamall on, that must have attracted quite a few listeners this morning. So yeah, that's essentially the quick bio of who we are here.
And what's the target audience for Colourful? Who are you aiming at?
Well, the target audience, when it was originally founded, was the BME community. I think the founder felt that there was not many voices representing the BME community on national broadcast radio. Over the years, that has continued to be diversified to bring in different kind of presenters and again targeting different communities. We now have Robert Hayward, for example, who's a former Conservative member presenting the Business Breakfast show, and he has a very strong listenership that is incredibly diverse in terms of not targeting one particular ethnic group, if you like. So yeah, we're trying more and more to diversify our listeners, to have different communities come in, and that's one of the things that, for example, the programming that we've had this morning, we don't just focus on, say, for example, this particular issues affecting the black community, but rather issues that affect really everybody, including the BME community.
And of course, a massive different communities in London, and that's great that you are trying to target the various communities in London. But this morning, you invited me here to talk about my bid to be Mayor of London, and we had a very fascinating discussion around some issues around housing, for example, around security. Tell me a bit about how you found that interview this morning, some of the issues that you found interesting.
I thought that it was incredibly insightful, some of the answers you gave. There were some areas that were so clear that you just tower above in terms of your knowledge. The first thing, obviously, the EU, and I suppose it comes as no surprise that you're the Conservatives in the European Parliament, because your knowledge around that area is very good. I thought you also had very good insight, I suppose, particularly on your own behalf and your own knowledge and personal experiences on issues around security and fundamentalism, which is of course one of the greatest challenges that we're facing in modern times, particularly in a city like London. That must be one of the most under threat cities around the world. But also there were some things that perhaps for someone my age, I'm in my mid-20s, trying to sort of save a bit of money to be able to buy a house in London, and as somebody who has a political and policy background, and some of the things I thought are hugely affecting house prices is the issue of supply. And I've been tremendously frustrated by politicians who essentially have been dealing with the issue of demand. How can we help you to be able to sort of get a cheaper deposit, things like the Help to Buy scheme, things like, for example, being able to part own a house, which are all great initiatives, highly encourageable, but that's not really the crux of the problem we have. The problem we have is that we're just not building enough houses to accommodate the amount of people who are living in London. And I thought you offered us some really good answers on that. I also happen to have very strong views of what London should look like, so I'm not the kind of person who believes that planning laws should be scrapped altogether and done away with. But you did speak quite well about trying to find a balance between how can we ensure that planning laws are not really affecting negatively the amount of houses that we're building, but at the same time we are making sure that whatever we're building is in keeping with the aesthetic beauty and nature of London. So I was quite impressed with that answer that you gave there.
Well, it's very important. I thought that we talked about housing, particularly as you say, we focus on the supply issue. Not enough politicians talk about the supply issue, and particularly the fact that actually it's not only developers that own large parts of land. There's large, what they call public sector land banking. TfL, the greater GLA, local councils also own a lot of land. That needs to be released so people can start building on that, but also get the right balance between developers and also the local communities. So I thought that was a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely right, yeah. And of course, one of the things about breaking the essentially an oligopolistic market, a market that's very hard to enter for many people. The barriers are incredible, very hard for someone to become a property developer and stuff like that. And so you kind of touch on some of the issues that we have around the struggle that businesses are having to develop property across London, and I thought that was very good.
Well, Gus, thank you very much for inviting me on this morning.
Thank you very much for coming.
I know I'm going to be invited back onto this, and
absolutely.
to talk about my vision for London and some of the issues we talked about today: transport, but housing, environment, and hopefully I'll have time to sort of lay out that vision in the next few months.
Super.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.